And we would, oh, let me just do this here, continue, there we go. So welcome everybody to Course Design Essentials. We're delighted to have you with us today. My name is Carolyn Samuel, and I'm a Senior Academic Associate at Teaching and Learning Services. And I'm here with a number of colleagues today, Mariella Tovar, Jenny Ferris, Rose Elikanachi, and Mariette Xenopoulos. And we're going to be your team for today, tomorrow, and Thursday, leading you through Course Design Essentials. We will be putting some links in the chat for you. Mariette, our moderator, will be looking after that. And the team will also be checking the chat for questions periodically. We will have opportunities for interaction during the webinar, and we're actually going to begin with a polling question. So our polling question, I'm just going to call this up on the screen here. Our polling question is right here. Oh, that is the wrong polling question. Let me take that down. That's, and poll, sorry, this happens. Let me take that down. The polling question is actually, how prepared do you feel to redesign your course? And I'm going to see if I can get that up here. So if I do polls, I should have an option. And poll. Let me try this differently. There we go. I'm sorry. Okay, there we go. How prepared do you feel to redesign your course? That is our question. So we're going to give you a minute just to respond. We've got answers coming in. A few more people have yet to vote. Still waiting for some responses. Okay, well, we can leave it at that. I'm going to end the poll. There we go. And I'm going to share the results. There we go. So how prepared do you feel from not at all prepared to fully prepared? And we've got 50% in the middle, and then we've got a little bit on either side. Okay, so this information is helpful for us to have a sense of where you're at, how you're feeling about course design. And just to let you know, we're going to pose this question on the third day of course design as well. We're going to hope that everybody gets a little bit more confident and feeling more prepared to design their course. All right, so I will take this off the screen and remove that. There we go. So the goal of your course, the one that you're going to design, is to promote student learning. Therefore, we promote a course design model where student learning is at the center. And that's what we're going to introduce to you now. So we have this model coming up on the screen. Let you take a look at that. The model proposes 5 elements that need to be considered when planning a course. So we've got context, and context was addressed in the email that was sent to you either last week or yesterday. We had a preparation activity for you, and anybody who registered after 12 o'clock yesterday will not have received this. So maybe Mariette, if you can put that document in the chat for anybody who didn't receive it, that would be great. So context is where your course is located in the program, what the discipline is, and what the characteristics of the students might be. And we hope you had a chance to reflect on those questions. So nobody needs to submit those responses. Those are just reflection questions for you. And then we have content. Content is what the key concepts and ideas are that are related to your course. We're not going to focus much on that in this Course Design Essentials, but it is important for you to think about the content that will be addressed in your particular course. And then we have outcomes. So outcomes over here, just click to outcomes. Yep, there we go. So with outcomes, we're asking the question, what will students know, value, and be able to do? And throughout the webinar series, we're using this bullseye outcome every time we refer to outcomes. For assessment, we pose the question, how will you and students know the extent to which outcomes have been achieved? And we're using this ruler icon throughout the webinar series to indicate every time we're going to be talking about assessment. And then we have the question, strategies. So we have, the question is, what engagement and interaction activities will support student learning? And for that, we're using these gears to identify strategies throughout the webinar series. Now, designing a course is not a linear process, and planning is frequently revised in order to produce a whole picture perspective where all of these components work together toward the achievement of a clearly articulated plan for student learning. And with this model in mind, we have two outcomes for this webinar series. So these are outcomes for you. We hope that by the end of the webinar series, you'll be able to describe learning-centered course design principles and strategies. So here we have learning at the center, and that you'll be able to apply these principles and strategies to the redesign or to the design of your course by developing a course plan with identified learning outcomes, assessments, and instructional strategies. So that's what we were hoping for this webinar series. Now, we're going to begin with an activity. Let me just click on one more thing here. There we go. Okay, so I'd like you to take a look at the table that's on the screen. In the first column, we have learning outcomes. In the middle column, we have assessment strategies. And in the right column, we have instructional strategies. Now, if we look at the table across, we have the first outcome, do collaborative writing, and an associated assessment strategy to know if students achieve this learning outcome would be to assign a collaborative report. That could be the assessment. We have a blank space in the instructional strategy box, blank here. Illustrate processes is another outcome. It's what we want students to be able to do. We've got a blank space for the assessment strategy, but an instructional strategy, so a way to teach students and give them opportunities for practice and feedback, would be to have them do concept mapping or mind mapping. Our last outcome is apply concepts to solve problems. And the assessment strategy associated with that is to give students an exam to see if they can do this. And we have a blank space for the instructional strategy. So the task for you is to fill in these blanks, and I'm going to give you choices. So let me just click here. And you have 3 choices. So this is not a chat activity. I'm not asking you to type anything in the chat. This is a thinking activity. Using the 3 options at the top of the screen, in which boxes would you place them? And just take a minute to think. So not asking you to type anything, only think. Which boxes would you put them in? A quiet moment while people are thinking. And now I'm going to share my choices. And I have to tell you that there may be more than one right answer. Okay, I'm just sharing my choices. They don't have to be your choices. So here are my choices. This is where I would put them. And now I am going to ask you to put something in the chat. The question at the top of the slide is, what's your rationale? So we would like to know what your rationale is for your choices. Now you can work with one example. You don't have to put everything in the chat. Tell us what you chose. If you made the same choice as I made, that's okay. You can tell us your rationale. I will tell you mine after. If you made different choices, pick one example and tell us your rationale. And I'm going to go to the chat now to take a look at what's happening there. Let me just click on that. And let's see what's coming in through the chat. I'm not seeing responses. Oh, there we got one. Oh, okay, good. Same choices, instructional strategies should prepare students for assessment in similar ways. Instructional strategy is similar to assessment. Assessment, any other thoughts? Same choices, rationale for weekly quizzes are exam prep. The skills students build during instruction are applied in the assessment. No weekly assessments in pairs or threes. Same choices on my end. They felt logical. Oh, I love that. They felt logical. Yeah, we're going to unpack that, the felt logical part. What makes them feel logical? There is a logic to it. Instructional strategies, built assessment strategies, or prepare students for assessments. Okay, so it looks like everybody's pretty much on the right track. I feel like, you know, a good portion of our work is done, team. Okay, same choices. This is nice. All right, so let's just, I'm going to stop looking at the chat for now so that I can concentrate on the slides and on talking with you. So I'm going to explain my rationale. And I've put the word alignment on the screen. So what we see here are examples of alignment. And indeed, if we have an outcome where we ask students to do collaborative writing, it makes sense to give an assessment where students are called upon to do collaborative writing. And it makes sense to have a strategy where students get to practice writing collaboratively and get feedback on that so that they are able then to succeed at the assessment. So we say these are aligned. And that's the logic. The other examples work the same way. If we want students to be able to illustrate processes, we're going to give them an assignment. In this case, it's an infographic, and this is just an example. There can be many other ways for students to demonstrate their ability to illustrate processes, but in this case, we've chosen the example of an infographic. And they will have practice by doing concept mapping, and by doing this activity that we're engaging in this strategy, they'll be able to produce an infographic, and then we will know that the learning outcome has been achieved. And exactly the same thing for the last example. Apply concepts to solve problems, give students practice, for example, and there could be other ways, by doing weekly problem quizzes, and then they have an exam. So there is alignment here. That's a key piece. And then we have one other thing that I'd like to highlight, that we're saying by the end of the course, students will be able to do these things. This is how we begin the planning. We begin with what happens at the end. And that's the backward design approach to course design. So these are two important pieces we'd like you to retain, that there should be alignment among the outcomes, the assessment strategies, and the instructional strategies. And when you begin your planning, begin by the end of this course, and that's backward design. Okay, so we're going to keep going. And I think we're over to Rose here. Rose, who is co-facilitating with me today. Rose?
Thank you very much, Caroline. So with the backward design and alignment in mind, I would like to invite all of us to click on the link which Marietta, moderator, would put in the chat any minute now. This link should take you to the page where you can access the course design essential resource document, and we can also see it on our screen right now. Please let us know in the chat if you have any difficulty accessing this document. This document is an editable PDF, which includes the course design essential resource document, as I said earlier, and it would be used throughout the course of this 3-part webinar series. We're going to ask you to create your own course alignment plan for the course which you are designing or redesigning. And on page 16 of this resource document, which you should be looking at right now, you would see it includes the document that has been used, like I said, we're going to ask you to create your own course as alignment plan for your course redesign. And on page 16 of that page, you should be able to see the course alignment plan.
Okay, Rose, I'm going to interrupt you for a minute. I'm sorry, we have a question in the chat. Where is it? So I'm just going to toggle to the web page. Let me just go to the web so we can illustrate that. Okay, can I get a thumbs up from Mariella or Rose? Can you tell me that you see the webinars page? Okay, lovely, thank you. So we are on the webinars page, and Mariette did put the link in the chat. If you scroll down just a little bit, you get to course design essentials, and then you can see the resource document here is here, download resource PDF and download course alignment plan. Those are the two documents that we'll be working with today. Okay, so I'm going to toggle back to the slides. Everybody should be able to download those two. Can we get a sense in the chat? Just say yes to let us know that you're able to access the documents. Okay, we got one response, so we know it's working. That's important. Okay. Lovely. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, Rose, go ahead.
Thank you very much for that, Caroline. I really appreciate it. So now that we have all have access to our resource document, on page 16 of that resource document, you should find an example of the course alignment plan. And this illustrates an example from an intensive course taught by Professor Julia Freeman and Kevin Minor. You can see the learning outcomes at the top of the page, and then you see the lines across the page with assessment, instructional strategies, and learning technologies, as earlier illustrated by Caroline. And over the course of these 3 days of the webinar series, we're going to help you develop a plan for your course. Moving forward, we'd like to begin by going over the learning outcomes for this webinar. We are hoping that by the end of this webinar, you are able to explain the concept of alignment and the context of the course design, and describe the characteristics of a well-written learning outcomes. Going forward, now that we have mentioned the learning outcomes, I think it would be useful for us to understand what it means or what we're talking about when we refer to learning outcomes. Learning outcomes are a clear statement of the knowledge, skills, and values the student will develop as a result of participating in your course. Now, developing the learning outcomes can actually help to focus the course that you're teaching by keeping the learning outcomes in mind throughout the course design thinking. We're able to ensure that the ways that we approach the aspects of our course planning are well designed and aligned to help students achieve the learning outcomes by the end of the course. Now, as we begin to think about this, we begin the thinking process for our learning outcomes, we suggest a couple of guiding questions that would help you out with creating a learning outcome for your course. Now, what is most important for students to learn in your course? What do you want them to know, value, and be able to do at the end of the course?
Okay, thank you, Rose. So now we're going to give you an opportunity to engage in a small group activity. And we would like you to go to page 2 of the resource document. And on page 2, we have, you should see something called, well, it's exercise 1, consider guidelines for writing learning outcomes. So let's just go over the instructions before we send you into breakout rooms. The goal of the exercise is for you to develop an understanding of how to write learning outcomes. And I'd like you to imagine that a colleague asks you, what guidelines should I follow when writing learning outcomes? So if somebody posed that question to you, what would you answer? And what I'd like you to do is read the learning outcomes that are listed on that page, and note that they've been taken from courses in a variety of disciplines. And as you read them, look for patterns in how the learning outcomes are written. What patterns can you discern? And make note of these. And from the patterns, write down guidelines that you would suggest your colleague follow. So your task is to come up with guidelines. Someone says to you, how do I write guidelines? How do I write learning outcomes? And you can say, well, here are some guidelines you can follow. So we're going to put you in breakout rooms. You're going to have maybe 6 minutes or 7 minutes to discuss this with the people in your group. You do not need to reach consensus. You can have different ideas, but you should discuss what those guidelines are. But you don't need to agree with each other. That's not a problem. I'm just going to check. We've got 28 people. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. Let me just go to breakout rooms and we'll set you up there. Just take a minute, won't be very long. Okay, create. And okay, and we're going, oh, sorry, this won't take long. Okay, so I'm going to open the rooms now. You'll have about 6 or 7 minutes in the rooms, and then we'll call you back, and we're going to ask you when you come back what guidelines you would offer. So here we go. I just need to get a sense, is this working? Yeah, I get it. Okay, fingers up. Okay, almost everybody is in breakout rooms. Okay. So it could be that there's some people who've chosen not to go to breakout rooms. That's all right too. Okay, so we have 3 people who've chosen to remain here. That's okay. We'll just wait for our other participants to come back in about 6 minutes. Just going to ask my colleagues, does anybody know how we're doing for time?
It's currently 9:55.
No, I mean, are we on track with time?
Oh, okay. 1 second. I think so. I'll go back to the time.
And Mariette, you know, you can pause the recording now because we don't need to have this section recorded. Okay, so we have participants coming back. And I think everybody is back with us. So Mariette, if you can hit record again, that would be great. And now we would like to know what guidelines you came up with. So this is an opportunity to post some guidelines into the chat and let's see what you have. What would you tell a colleague who says, what guidelines should I follow when writing learning outcomes? You don't have to write them all, just like give us a sampling of what you have. There's usually that awkward moment when people are typing. There we go. That's nice. Okay, so I'm just going to take a look through. Each outcome should start with a verb. Good learning outcomes are specific about the knowledge or skill expected. Use active verbs, testable, measurable. Use a verb representing what the student would be able to do in capital letters. Use active verbs. Action words as the first word in the outcome and have increasing level of difficulty understanding. Use actions to describe the acquired skills. At the beginning, the goals are to repeat and rephrase knowledge, be specific about the knowledge and skills students will develop. Describe one skill in the outcome. Nice, okay, so there's a lot coming in. This is all good stuff. Okay, so yet again, I feel a bulk of our work team is already done because participants get it. Okay, so I'm just going to do a little recap of the many different things that you've identified here, which are really right on. So each outcome includes an action expressed with a verb, and mostly this verb is at the beginning of the sentence. The verb is in its base form or the imperative. There is a question here about verbs that one might not use, and let me come to that in just a minute. Each outcome is associated with only one verb. So one verb can simplify the assessment. And if you have a very long outcome with multiple verbs, it can be broken up into constituent parts so that it's simpler for students to understand and simpler to identify the assessment. The verb is followed by a statement that describes the knowledge or skills that will be demonstrated and ultimately assessed. And here I would like you to note the absence of the verbs know, learn, and understand. So those are verbs that we want to stay away from in our learning outcomes because they're difficult to assess. Because if you say students will know something, how are you going to know that they know it? They have to actually do something that will demonstrate their knowing. So it has to be something observable in order to assess it. So coming back to the question that's in the chat, should we not use verbs like increase, improve, enhance? You need your verb choices should be should represent behaviors that students can demonstrate. And you will see in the resource document on pages 3 and 4, we have more information about learning outcomes and how to write them, and you will see some examples of verbs. So you should be able to imagine what the result would look like, what form the result would take, and what the student would do to show their competency. So those are things to keep in mind when you're selecting the verbs. And the other thing I just want to point out is that the sentences are generally not very long. Okay, so those are some guidelines. We're going to say some more about learning outcomes. We're not finished yet. I'm going to change the slide here, and we're going to go to Bloom's taxonomy. And I'm going to guess that some of you, maybe many of you, are already familiar with Bloom's taxonomy. You might have heard about it. That's been a change over the years in the field of education. More and more people are becoming knowledgeable about Bloom's taxonomy, which is really nice. So this taxonomy is represented as a pyramid. The pyramid is not in the resource document, but again, we have more information on pages 3 and 4. The levels of learning that we see in this slide refer to the various ways in which we can engage cognitively in learning. We start at the bottom of the pyramid, foundationally. This is sort of the foundation. We have remembering, which is like recalling information, and understanding, which might be identifying examples of a given term or concept or principle. And these represent lower order learning. They're not bad, it's good. Lower order learning is fine, but we also want to build on that foundation, and we want to move up the pyramid where we get into deeper learning or higher order learning. So we have applying, which refers to using information, rules, and procedures in concrete situations. Analyzing, which would be breaking information into parts to explore patterns and relationships maybe analyzing charts or other data to support conclusions. Evaluating, which would be justifying a decision or a course of action. And creating, which would be generating new ideas or new products. So these are higher order and they are more cognitively demanding. As I tell my students, because I do teach this to students too, it takes more brain power. So the higher up the pyramid you go, the more brain power is needed. Now it's worth noting that the higher levels require the ability to do the lower levels as well. So for example, you must be able to remember a concept and understand it to be able to apply it. So if you're assessing more than one outcome, we would suggest using the higher level because lower levels are subsumed under that. Now, these levels may be a useful tool to help us select the verbs to articulate the learning outcomes. You might want to, as a productive exercise, you might want to try targeting different levels of learning with your learning outcomes. So that's just something to keep in mind as you do your planning. Now, we've talked about the cognitive domain. We'd like to share another taxonomy with you. This is the affective domain. And this might be less familiar, perhaps, to many of you. I don't know if anybody has heard of the affective domain. So the affective domain refers to how we deal with things emotionally, such as feelings, values, attitudes. And we've got 5 levels here: receiving, responding, valuing, organization, and characterization. Now, we're not going to go into a lot of detail here. You do have quite a bit of information in the resource document about affective learning outcomes. And in fact, there's a whole appendix with some examples there for you. But we think this could be useful depending on the course you teach. You might want to include affective learning outcomes in addition to cognitive ones. And I wanted to mention as well that in our registration, we posed the question about how we could make this webinar series more inclusive and I guess more inclusive for everybody. And we received a request that there be some discussion of culturally different knowledge sharing and learning traditions. And we feel that this is a good way to be more inclusive by having affective outcomes as well, if appropriate for your course. But it is a way to broaden the ways that students will be able to demonstrate their learning in your course. Now, we're not going to go into detail here, but we do have the afternoon session today and tomorrow and Thursday, and we can certainly talk more about culturally appropriate ways or different ways, more inclusive ways of creating the outcomes and creating assessments that will support students in inclusive ways. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say right now about the affective outcomes, but we hope that we can continue that conversation this afternoon. All right, so now we'll go to our next slide. So just sort of to summarize what we've talked about, I'd like to say that useful learning outcomes focus on student learning, and they're learner-oriented. The learning outcomes should be elaborated just beyond just the subject matter itself to consider the ways that student can engage with the content. And useful learning outcomes are also clear and concise. They have to be so that the reader doesn't get lost in a description of a single learning outcome, and they should be understandable by both the instructor and the students. They're potentially measurable, so they can be assessed, and you'll be able to determine whether the students have attained the learning outcomes, and students should also be able to know the extent to which the learning outcomes have been achieved. And then finally, here we have the learning outcomes are achievable, and given the context in your course, the learning outcomes need to be appropriate for the level of your students. So just before I turn it over to Rose for a minute, I do want to point out that Mariette remembered, thank you, to put a link in the chat to some examples of verbs that we can use with the affective learning outcomes. So we would encourage you to take a look at that if you feel that affective outcomes would be a good fit with your course. So you have some examples at this website. Okay, so Rose, I'm going to change the slide and turn it over to you for learning outcomes. Why? Why do we have learning outcomes?
Thank you very much, Caroline. With the information that we now have about learning outcomes, the question is, why do we need learning outcomes? And like what Elias said, it's important for both the instructors and the students. Now, from the instructor perspective, it helps to clarify your expectation as an instructor on what you want your students to gain from the course you're designing or redesigning. It also guides your decisions as an instructor on what your content would be, the content you want to share, the strategies you want to use to instruct your class, and what assessment you want to use in the class as well. And finally, it helps you communicate with your other instructors, especially if you're co-instructing a class with a colleague. And for the students, it helps to clarify what your instructors want them to learn, what your learning expectations are for them, and it also helps to guide their learning because if they're aware of what their learning expectations are, they're able to focus, assess themselves, and then know if they're meeting these learning expectations.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Rose. And now we're going to give you an opportunity to do some practice. So practice with what we've talked about today. And I'm going to put a polling question up. So we're going to pose this question. I'll open the poll in just a minute. We've got an example learning outcome. You will know the neuroscience behind how habits are formed and broken. So that's our example learning outcome. And the question is, what main problem do you identify in this learning outcome? Now, we're not going to ask you to answer in the chat. I'm just going to open a poll. Let me see if I get this right this time. Poll. And I'm going to choose the second polling question and launch the poll. There we go. Okay. And now you can vote. I'm hoping you can vote. You've got 3 choices there. We'll let you read. The voting is working. 1 person has responded. Okay, more responses are coming in. Okay, still a few people who are thinking. That's all right. We can keep this open for another few seconds. Okay, I'm just watching. There's still a couple of people who haven't responded. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. I don't think anybody else wants to vote. End the poll and share the results. There we go. Okay, so I hope everybody can see the results now. Can I get a thumbs up from one of my colleagues? Okay, lovely. Everybody can see the results. That's great. And indeed, it is unclear how know the neuroscience would be measured. So that would be challenging. You would want to pick another verb and replace it with something that would allow students to demonstrate whatever this outcome. Okay, I'm going to take this off the screen. There we go. Oops. Okay, we've got another practice question for you. You've identified the main problem there, and now I'm going to give you another question. Learning outcome, you will be able to explain fundamental concepts and theories in sociology, apply them to real-world scenarios, and analyze their impact on community organizations. That's a long sentence. So my question is, how could you make it easier for students to understand? I'm going to put up a polling question again, and you can select more than one response. So you should see it on your screen now, and more than one response is okay. Okay, the answers are coming in. So looking, we've got a little more than half of you have responded. Oh, now the answers are coming in. Still a few more people. Anybody wants to respond? How could you make it easier for students to understand? Okay, so I'm going to end the poll in 3, 2, 1. And you should see the results now. And indeed, there's more than one possibility. Yes, it's probably a good idea to divide this into 3 separate learning outcomes. Yes, you could write one outcome that captures the highest level. For example, it could be analyze, with the other ones being subsumed. You could include a definition of fundamental that's maybe less important than the other 2, but it's possible, but keeping in mind that you want to keep the outcome fairly short. So if you were going to include a definition of fundamental, maybe that could be actually apart from the learning outcome, because you don't want the learning outcome to grow longer and longer. So we have lots more information in the resource document on learning outcomes and the taxonomies. We'd like to encourage you to take a look at that. I'm just going to stop sharing the results here and close this. And before we go on, we have a few minutes. Let's just open it up for questions right now, and you can put some questions in the chat if you like, or if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask a question. We've got a little bit of time. Okay, so we have a question here. How many objectives should we create for a course? Predictable question. There isn't a hard and fast answer. There's no rule for this, and courses are different. So I can give you a guideline and say maybe 4 to 5 outcomes, but it's not a hard and fast rule. And, you know, some courses are 3 credits, 39 hours, and some courses are intensive courses. Some courses are week-long courses for fewer credits. So courses are all different shapes and sizes. So it's a judgment call. You don't want to overwhelm students. You don't want to be overwhelmed yourself. Think about what's manageable. Think about what the most important outcomes are. You don't have to articulate everything for students. You could actually develop a long list for yourself and then pick the ones that you want to share with students. That might be another approach. So I'm just going through the chat here. How can we assess the slides of the 3 webinars? Oh, how can we access? So everything will be posted to the webinars page. Mariette, if you can you put the link back in the chat to the webinars page on the TLS website? And we will post the slides there. We will also post a video recording of each webinar. The recording takes a little bit more time though, because we have to wait for Zoom to do the processing, and then we'll post it. Are outcomes in the affective domain frequently harder to assess? I'm not sure. You know what? I'm going to open that up to my colleagues. If any of my colleagues would like to address that, I'm just going to see, does anybody want to jump in, colleagues? Nobody wants to jump in. Okay.
I can jump in.
Mariella, please go ahead.
I would say yes, they are harder to assess but there are some creative ways that you can assess those outcomes. There's some reflection. You can see before and after. Sometimes you want to poll for certain type of attitudes and then see whether they have changed at the end of the course. But they are, in general, yes, they are harder to assess. And sometimes it's more like something that you don't have an assessment for grading, but you can have assessment during class and have conversations with the students. I don't know. We have
I don't know if that adequately answers the question, but you're welcome to unmute yourself if you have a follow-up question to that, or you'd like to know more.
Hi.
Hi, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I would like to know more, but maybe in the afternoon sessions. Yeah, but thank you.
Okay, that's great. We can continue the conversation there. That's a great idea.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, so we have another question here. Should they be hard or easy or a mix? So if we think back to Bloom's taxonomy and the pyramid that was on the screen earlier, it's probably a good idea to have a mix and help students move up the pyramid into some higher order learning. So if you start with something a little bit easier, it can help students build their confidence. But ultimately, we want to help students develop their higher order thinking skills. So a mix can be appropriate, but also it's always going to be contextually appropriate. Think about your course. And if you're teaching a 100 level course or a 200 level course, you might have outcomes that are different from students taking a 300 level or a 400 level course or a graduate level course. So the starting points might be different. And that's why it's so important to think about your course context and the reflection questions that we sent out to everybody before the webinar, because that can help you think through what outcomes are going to be appropriate in the context of your course. Okay, I'm just scrolling through. I like to map course objectives to all my specific assignments in the course. This is shared with the students. Is this a good idea? Well, probably yes. Why not make this transparent to your students? The more information they have about the plan, the better they can understand your expectations and follow along. So yeah, great idea. Let's just see, we've got one more. What is this? Okay. And okay, so I do have a note here. Should we refer colleagues to assessing affective outcomes? So Mariella, I know you sent this to me privately. That's okay. I'm not really sure which document you're referring to because we have content in the resource document. We have an appendix there. So if it's something in addition to the appendix, please put a link in the chat. And if we're talking about the same thing, then we're okay.
We're referring that I was thinking about the appendix, because in the appendix there are some specific ideas about assessing, and the reason why that's there is because in recognition that sometimes we need some specific ideas because it's not easy to, they're not easy outcomes to assess. Yeah, great. Sorry, I meant the appendix.
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you. Okay. So I'm coming back to the slides now. We're going to go on. I'm going to go here, and Rose, over to you.
Now that we have gone through all of this, it's time to assess and reassess. We wanted to come back to the learning outcomes for this session, and we're hoping that by participating in this webinar, you feel equipped enough to explain the concept of alignment in the context of course design, and you're able to describe the characteristics of a well-written learning outcomes from all that we have said in this session. So like we already said, going forward, and the slides, next slide, please. We wanted to ask you now to please refer to page 18 of the resource document, which you already have access to. In case you missed it earlier, Maria would just remind us by putting the link again in the chat. And I would like you to, everyone of us to, look at this research document, this course alignment plan, and I want you to start creating your own, start filling this out. Remember, this is a worksheet. You should prefer, if you prefer to work in a Word document, we also have a Word document in the link as well. Begin to think about your course outline, like Caroline, you just toggle to it. Yes, we do have
Yeah, I'm just scrolling down to where they can fill this in the PDF, and then I will show the Word document in a minute. Oops,
Yes.
just scrolling through. Sorry, it's lower down.
It's fine. It's on page 18, the resource document that we're referring to, the course alignment plan. The PDF is fillable, so you can type into it if you would love to. And yes, just like Caroline is displaying right now. Awesome. So you can always fill that in. And if you don't feel comfortable with a PDF, a fillable PDF, we do have a Word document that's also on that page as well, which you can also access and fill out should you prefer. Now, going back to the slide, we want you to, like I said, it's a draft. Just do not, it's a worksheet. You can always change and you can always edit going forward. But looking at this now, we want you to begin to think about your learning outcome for the course that you're designing or redesigning. Take a minute to reflect on what we have shared in this webinar today and begin to craft your learning outcomes. And as you do this, ask yourself this question: what is important for your students to learn in your course? And we've talked about these questions over and over today. We also want you to ask yourself, what do you want them to know, value, and be able to do at the end of the course, taking into consideration the backward design, which we talked about earlier. Like I said earlier, it's a draft, it's a working sheet. You can always go back to it and re-edit and edit it going forward. And again, we'd like to, going forward, we want to remind you of the daily connection opportunity today and tomorrow and on Thursday. It's a 1 hour session where you are able to connect with other participants and TLS facilitators. And in this session, you'll be able to pose questions, share ideas, refine your plans for developing your course. In this session, you're allowed to bring questions that came up maybe when we were, discoursing in the webinar or while you were writing your learning outcomes. You can also come with your draft learning outcomes for feedback. And also have in mind that you can also come, even if you do not have a draft, it's not compulsory that you come with a draft. It could be a session where you begin the thinking process and like question and answer process to developing your own learning outcome. Please be aware that these sessions are strongly recommended.
Okay, thank you, Rose. So we're just going to wrap up now. We have a little bit of information for you at the end. This is just a reminder that from the 8th to the 18th of December, TLS is offering a number of instructor support sessions. We encourage you to go to the website that's listed below and that Mariette has just put in the chat. Thank you. And you can see a variety of sessions that are available this week and next week to help you get ready for winter 21, which is almost upon us, but we want you to know that TLS is here for you. We're going to do our best to support you with preparation for the winter term. And in our last, it's 10:30, not even our last minute. The last thing we want to say is that when you finish this webinar, when you log off, take a minute to stretch, because we've all been sitting for a long time. And it's good to give the body a big stretch. And Mariette's going to put a link in the chat to some exercises that you can do. And with that, we will say thank you very, very much for joining us this morning. We look forward to seeing you this afternoon and to hearing your questions and to helping you advance your course alignment plan. So thank you very much, everybody, and see you this afternoon. Mariette, you can stop the